We're talking today about the me statement, the answer to the question, tell me about yourself. And we were just talking, Rini, about how there are 4 elements. The second one has to do with education and skills. So tell us a little bit about how do we share our education and skills? What's important to share about that?
Well, again, the education skills that you'll want to talk about relate back to the actual kinds of employment that you're hoping to get hired for. So a couple of examples would be, let's say that you haven't had any official training, but you have had on-the-job training. You know, you were hired, they have a specific way of doing things, and they took the time. Maybe it could go anywhere from a week to a month, where they actually trained you.
Or it could be things you teach yourself,
right,
too, right?
Right, absolutely. For example, if you've been taking care of your family, for the last 12 years, and now you're in re-entry mode into the workforce, you could pull from hobbies and volunteer work if it was more applicable to the kind of work that you're hoping to get hired for.
And you know what? I've done that a lot when I've helped people with their resume, especially people re-entering after taking care of a parent who is very ill. And a lot of times when an elder parent is very ill, it requires a person to entirely take time off of work. Step away from work. And then when they re-enter, if they're going into some sort of caregiving, they might mention that they have that experience already, even though they haven't done it for pay. They've gained valuable experience doing that for a family member.
And most often an employer doesn't really care if you've been paid for something. They just want to know what you're doing.
Exactly.
If you're going to be hired. Another example would be accounting. Let's say you're going for an accounting position. You would want to mention that you have a 4-year degree in accounting or certification for an entry-level position. That would be very important. Administrative work, you would want to mention that you have updated your computer skills to MS 2010 or 13, which would include Word, Excel, Access, QuickBooks, PowerPoint, and so forth.
So that update, that's really important, right?
Right. Because if you're over the age of 47, which is my magic number, the biggest issue out there with employers, especially if they're under the age of 47, is have you kept your skills up? So if you can say that you have updated them recently, you're probably going to go to the front of the line. CNA work, I want to know where you got your certification and when you received that as well. Warehouse work has become a very sophisticated business today. So days gone by, you were able to get hired with little or no experience. Today that has changed. Employers today somehow want you to have a warehouse certification, proof that, again, you can hit the ground running. And so your OSHA 10, a current OSHA 10 certification, forklift, and warehouse training would, again, put you in front of the line if, in fact, you had gone through that. Here's a different kind of example, Lynette, that could actually not work on your behalf. And that would be, let's say you were looking for warehouse work, but you have a master's degree in philosophy, for example. It's not really going to be related to your job at all. So by putting that on your resume for an entry-level position is actually going to overqualify you every single time.
And it'll actually hurt you.
It'll hurt you. You won't get any response whatsoever because they think that you're going to jump ship the moment something better comes along or more in your field of interest.
And I notice when I help people with their resumes, a lot of times people, they worked hard for that degree, and it's very hard for them to not put it on. But again, the really important point here is what's relevant. So if you have a degree in culinary arts, for example, and you're looking for a job in accounting, then don't mention the culinary arts, or vice versa. If you have a degree in accounting and all of a sudden you're changing your career and you're going for a job as a baker or a chef, the accounting degree may not be as relevant. So focus on the things that are relevant. Now we come to responsibilities and accomplishments. These are the other 2 important topics that you should always include in your me statement. And Rini, your key to understanding how to do this well is to say, so what? What do you mean?
Well, what we see and hear a lot of in our business is a lot of responsibility statements without attaching the accomplishment statement or the results of the hard work. And what we've learned is that employers really want to know about the accomplishment piece of that. So we want to make sure that we're providing that for anyone that we are interviewing. We find that the biggest mistake actually that people are making today is when it comes to describing their accomplishments, they're not really providing a context to compare it to. So this is what we call that so what factor. An example here would be, let's say you were a manager and in your me statement you started talking about, well, I managed 100 people. The interviewer might be thinking, well, okay, did they all quit on the same day that you started? Did they produce what was expected of 400 people versus 100 people? Did they work there before and therefore required no training at all? Or were they poorly trained and needed help? So when you're asking yourself the question, so what? Why is this relevant? What is the result of those responsibility statements? It becomes very clear about what you can do for this employer if they decide to bring you on.
Yeah. Another word that we could use for accomplishments is the impact that you made. So you managed 100 people. Yeah, but what was the impact? And here's another example. Let's say you managed a fleet of 200 vehicles. So what? Were 90% of them inoperable?
Oh boy.
Oh boy. Did your accident rate equal 1 for every 10 miles? That'd be a problem.
Oh boy.
Did they operate at the highest efficiency in the industry? Or were they converted to biofuel vehicles? See how getting into the detail and the impact of what you did as a manager makes such a difference.
It sure does. Really, when we think about answering that so what question, it's about what you did, what you accomplished, and how did it benefit the employer that you worked for last.
And usually, if you can't always do this, but usually if you can put numbers to it, that makes a huge difference because people tend to latch onto those numbers and remember them.
So even on that note, a lot of people really struggle with, well, what would that number be? I wasn't really privileged to that kind of information. Legally, you can get close to an estimate as long as it's within a normal range of activities. So even if you only increase productivity, let's say by 2%, that would be huge. That would be a very important number to be relating because, just to say, well, I increased productivity, the interviewer is wondering, well, by what? By what by what percentage, or are you just telling me this because, this is all you know to say?
So there are an almost infinite number of things that might matter to the employer. And again, go back to what's the job, what are the expectations, what are the things that are going to matter in this particular case when you're preparing for an interview. But here's a few examples. Increased revenues, met or surpassed speed or accuracy, saved money or time, consistently met deadlines.
Increased efficiencies, filled in for supervisor in his or her absence, improved workplace safety, improved customer service.
And there's many more. So these are just some examples. It's always, again, impressive when you can quantify that impact.